Hi, hello, and welcome to the third episode of the Stage Manager Supply Co. podcast. We have no sponsor this episode, but instead are brought to you by John and Susan Hackman. John and Susan Hackman gave birth to today's guest, making this all possible. My name is Claire, I am your host, and thank you for joining me today. As we start every podcast, I would first like to say that Black Lives Matter. And second, that I am creating this content on the traditional lands of the Kickapoo, Peoria, Potawatomi, Miami, and Sioux tribes. We will always start the podcast acknowledging the inequitable and unfair landscape and history of the United States, including, but not limited to, the fact that we are a country built on stolen land and developed on the backs of slaves. Stage Manager Supply Co. is my own attempt to bridge generations of systematic racism and oppression by making stage management arts education much more accessible. 2 disclaimers before I introduce today's guest. Disclaimer number 1. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host and the guest, and do not reflect the official policy or position of any other agency, production, organization, employer, or company. Disclaimer number 2. The host does not presume to be any sort of singular voice for stage management or stage managers. The views and opinions expressed by the host are extremely limited to the scope of her own experiences and are being widened each and every day, even right now. So, now that we have grounded our work in the reality of the world around us, let me introduce you to our guest. Our guest today is Liza Marie Hackman. Liza is an incredible stage manager with an impressive series of credits in the realm of Cirque du Soleil. Her credits include interning twice with Beatles Love, touring Russia and Canada as a stage manager with the international production of Blue Man Group, and then working on both Celestia and O as an on-call and then resident assistant stage manager. Liza also has experience in the world of dance with American Ballet Theater, as well as the world of musicals, being the original script PA for the out-of-town tryout of The Prom at the Alliance Theater in Atlanta. Liza's most impressive credit to me, though, is that she was a member of my graduating class at University of North Carolina School of the Arts, president of the USITT chapter bringing home the Tech Olympics gold, and one of the best ASMs on Ariadne of Naxos that a girl could ask for. Liza, thank you for joining me today.
Hello, thank you for having me, Claire.
I'm so excited to talk to you. The real joke of the podcast, for those of you listening, is that now I've conned Liza into talking to me for an hour. So joke's on all of you.
It's a joy to be here. I really am excited.
Me too. So how are you holding up during this pandemic?
I am holding as much as I think everyone else is. Currently back at home with my parents right now, so that's always fun for everyone involved. And waiting it out like everyone else.
Yeah. I first just want to get this out of the way that Cirque du Soleil announced very recently that they were laying off a majority of their employees and restructuring. So before we start discussing this, I first want to acknowledge that that sucks and that I am so sorry that that happened to you and to everyone employed there.
Thank you for mentioning that. Yeah, it's really sad that it had to come to that. And we heard it in 2 waves in the same day. And At first I was going to be safe, and then I was definitely not safe, along with many other people that were brought on for the project that I was brought on with. So it's very sad, especially for all of the international people that are in the States right now that moved here for shows, that are on specific contracts, that can't do other jobs, that can't receive unemployment, that have to move back home, even though they just came here to perform their art and their craft. So
yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Cirque is such a large employer of international performers around the world, and technicians and managers. It's devastating, truly. So This is my plug when I say everyone make sure you've registered to vote. I want to dive into talking about the great Liza Marie Hackman. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got your start, what your journey into stage management was?
Yeah, definitely. So I started at a very young age in competitive dance.
Hmm.
I have two older cousins, and they were dancers, and so I became a dancer at the same studio and danced competitively until age 14. When, as a lot of young ladies, young kids do. So that was first stage presence, learning about theater, being backstage, feeling the anticipation, very exciting. Um, so that was not stage manager related, but how I became to get into theater. And then I am really blessed to have an amazing uncle and aunt who are involved in a very large way in the theater community. My uncle, Mike Schleifer, was, when I was younger at the time, the production stage manager for Center Stage in Baltimore. And so I was able to see at a very young age what a stage manager actually does, which is probably the reason for this podcast, because nobody else really gets to see that. So I was
Yeah.
very lucky, very blessed, very early to see what that process actually looks like. Yeah. So that's how I got into stage management, got to know about it. And then when I was 14, I started working for the Annapolis Shakespeare Company, which at the time was a Shakespeare company for youth in the Annapolis area in Maryland. And that was how I got my experience. I called my first show 12th night at age of 14, and it was the coolest thing. And it was just me backstage, and I had to fly the rail as well and call the show. So I had cues taped behind the rail of which LX cues and which sound cues to call at the same time while I'm pulling in a drop. Or
Oh my gosh, did you have gloves on as you were calling the show?
oh yeah, it was
Oh,
full
amazing.
one woman show with a bunch of youth actors on stage. So that was a time. And then I
Amazing.
did theater for the next 3 years with them throughout high school, and my parents were very supportive. They realized that education in high school was not my priority at that point in time.
Sure.
So they were fully committed to making sure that I was at rehearsals and at tech, and my dad started building sets, and my mom got on the board, and they were all, it was full gung ho, get Liza.
John and Susan Hackman, the sponsors of this podcast. Yes.
Amazing people, amazing
Hmm.
people. Yeah,
So Liza, tell me then about when it was your time to kind of figure out if you wanted to continue your education. Um, were you looking to even go to college? Did you want to get a theater degree? Did you know, I want a BA, I want a BFA? What did that look like for you?
I don't think I really knew what any of it actually meant. I knew that I wanted to do theater in a professional setting, however involved that would be. Stage management, I knew to some extent, so I felt comfortable moving on forward with that. But program wise, I had no clue. I just knew that I wanted to do theater and create moments on stage for people to watch. Uh, so I stumbled across University of North Carolina School of the Arts and was like, oh, well, that looks like the right place for me to go. And it's a state school, which means it's more affordable than other private schools. And that made it a clear option for me to go there as opposed to anywhere else. And then got in. So
Yeah.
this reason.
And I mean, that's such an interesting point too about the state schools is that I don't think in my own personal discernment I did enough justice to my in-state schools. I
Mhm.
mean, I think U of I, I'm from Chicago, and I think U of I, ISU have great theater programs, and I tell students that we talk to all the time, I'm like, consider the options that you have available. Does your community college have a great associate's degree in theater? There are so many different avenues to accessing, a great theater education that aren't maybe, some big private brand name schools, if you will. Um, so then tell me about your time at the University of North Carolina School of the Arts, where one lucky day, you ran into me probably at a barbecue of sorts. How did your experience go there? How did you realize that you wanted to do circ? Was that something that happened there?
Cirque became a dream when I was 12. I saw Corteo in Colorado, Denver, Colorado. I saw the show Corteo, and it was like game changer. That's what I want to do. I have to do that. I need to be a part of that somehow, some way. And then it kind of fizzled because I was like, oh, never me. I could never possibly do that because I don't have the connections, right? But then you make the connections down the line, of course, through places like UNCSA. And my experience there was very challenging. I think going to a conservatory is very hard. And if you're not looking for a full-fledged gung-ho stage management or other discipline education, then it's probably not the best place for you, and that's okay.
Can you speak more on that for maybe younger listeners of why? Because I don't think I had any flippant idea of what I was getting myself into. What do you mean by that?
It's hard. It's really hard because you're going to wake up at 8 a.m. You're going to go to your academic classes. You're going to have your arts classes at 10 through 2, and then you're going to work. You're going to do theater work, and it's going to be hard from 3 to sometimes 11 o'clock at night, sometimes even 1 in the morning. And there's no limited protection on how much you actually work. There's, especially for stage managers, we can create documents at home. We're always working. We answer phone calls from artists. We create documents. We're sending emails at all hours of the day, and we get rare breaks, very limited breaks. And so that I was not prepared for, and very much so questioned being at the school my sophomore year, and did not really think I was going to continue on. And then did, and it was a wonderful experience after that, but it was challenging for sure.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think sophomore year especially resonates with a lot of people, both in high school and in college. Of this it's real, it's real. Um, so did you have any opportunities while you were at school, as you say, creating these connections? I think that's a draw of a conservatory, is that you can kind of buy your way into creating more connections. How did you develop a certain connection?
So I came across this organization called USITT. It's the United States Institute of Theatrical Technology. Wow, I can't believe I remembered that. And
Presidente.
yeah, it's an amazing program for high schoolers and college students as well. High schoolers attend. I've met many a high schooler at conference. Um, and it really is a great organization. If you haven't looked into it already, definitely look into it, because that's how I made my connections. There's this thing called conference, which didn't happen this year because of the pandemic, but hopefully next year will happen. And conference is a place where companies like Cirque du Soleil and Disney and ETC and Meyer Sound show up, and you get to have conversations with people in the industry. So that's where I made all of my connections. I made limited connections at school because I knew that I wanted to go work for Cirque as opposed to go to New York. New York isn't really my place. And even though
How did you figure that out?
I like musicals, and I think maybe one day it could be a very fun thing, but I had a bug in me to do Cirque, to do any kind of circus. It was like,
Yeah.
I got to get it out, at least try it. And if I hate it, then great,
Yeah.
I can move on.
Okay, sorry, I interrupted your
No,
story.
no, you're good. Where were we?
We're at USITT, yes.
USITT. Yeah. So it's a great organization to get in contact with professionals in the industry, in any aspect of the industry. People from Feld there, from Tate are there. Big companies are there. So if you're very interested in it, go do it. It's the best way to stay in contact with people. And then at school, you can also connect with your fellow students. So we would have board meetings and conference meetings at school of our student chapter of roughly 50 people. And we would talk about the things that other people have learned in the industry, and how to get better at different things. And it was very beneficial to even just communicate with people from other departments, because we were so isolated in our different cells of stage management and technical direction and lighting, and we rarely had conversations outside of those bubbles. It just bridged the gap. So now I feel very comfortable talking to my friends from the chapter, whereas I probably would have never spoken to them if it hadn't been for USIGT.
Yeah, no, that was something I was so envious of in school, is you seem to know every single person in every department. Um, then when you were at conference, is that where you made first contact with CIRC? Did you talk to them? I know you were an intern on Love. So how did going from talking to them at USITT transition you into that internship?
So I met an amazing, wonderful woman, Kim Scott, uh, my sophomore year at USITT. Now with CIRC, you can't intern until you're a junior, so I met her a year early, but at the perfect time in both of our lives, I think. And she became a mentor throughout my education for the next 3 years, and is still to this day a wonderful mentor. But I met her my sophomore year at conference, and she said, "Stay in touch with me and don't lose contact, and I will see you next year." And I said, "Yes, ma'am, thank you." And you walk away, you send your Merry Christmas emails and your Happy Easter emails, or whatever you do to stay in contact. And I met her the next year, and I had already had an internship locked down with American Ballet Theater, so that was happening, but I was still like, Cirque du Soleil, I want to do that. I have to do that. And she made it work for me. So I did 8 weeks with American Ballet Theater, and then I did 8 weeks in Vegas at the Beatles Love, where she was the company manager at the time.
Yeah, amazing. And I should mention that Liza isn't just a Cirque stage manager. She's also you were the original script PA on the out of town tryout of the prom.
Yes.
You had that amazing internship with ABT. Um, so what was interning with Cirque like? What was your day to day there? How did that work?
So the first internship was an under Kim Scott's belt kind of get to know the company, more of a production management internship. I was able to sit on head of department meetings and meetings that the show would have with the casino, Mirage, and then also I got to spend a lot of time with the kids in the show. It's, I think, the only Vegas show. Beatles Love is the only Vegas show that has kids in the show. And they have their own stage manager. And so I learned that stage management track and was able to hang out with the kids and do their track with them. And that was very exciting too. But it's very, I mean, you show up at 3, you leave at 11, you do your gig, do 2 shows a night, and you go home.
Wow. I'm just going to say that is so wild to me so many times in this podcast. Um, So great. So now you've interned with Cirque once. Then after the more production management, did you work with them in an official stage management internship capacity?
Yes. Second internship was stage management internship. I came back mostly to reintegrate or to integrate new children into the show, because I already knew what the needs were for the kids. And then also at the end of that, it was like 4 weeks of kid integration and then 4 weeks of pure stage management. So I was able to learn things like how to make their lineup, which we'll definitely talk more about that in this um, lineup, run multiple tracks of the show, learn artists and what their names actually are, because there's a lot of them and they speak many different languages, and like learn what PMed actually does and all the departments. So that was just learning how that office runs. The 5 of them in the office was huge experience, just being able to sit in the room.
Yeah, and I want to come back to the structure of Cirque and their whole team and their company. But you left Vegas for a while. You were still working with Cirque. You toured with Blue Man Group across Canada and Russia. What was that like? What was your job description? And what was your actual title?
My title was stage manager of the international touring show of Blue Man Group. Very different, but the same show from the Blue Man Group World Tour. Uh, our tour was a brand new tour. We built it in Ottawa in August of 2018. Um, it was a wild time, crazy time. And I also saw how CIRC had just bought in Blue Man Group the year before. So this was very fresh
Wow.
for CIRC. This was their first big opening of a Blue Man Group show from the CIRC end of things. And that was interesting to watch. I think because it wasn't a circus show, it wasn't taken care of as properly as it should, which was very eye-opening for someone who has rose-colored glasses about Cirque du Soleil. So I got to see some of the good, some of the bad, and it was a very educational experience overall. We went to Russia. That was exciting. Crazy times. And our Russia tour was supposed to be 9 weeks, and it was supposed to be 16 weeks in Russia, and it only ended up being 9. So we cut like half the tour because the show was doing poorly, and then we got sent home early, and then last minute went to Canada instead and did a leg there.
So, okay, a lot to unpack there for me.
Lot to unpack.
A lot to unpack. Speaking of, you were loading trucks.
Mm-hmm.
What was the description of the job? Because I feel like we might primarily have an audience that's focused on a very equity centric stage management, paging curtains, flashlighting. I've seen pictures of you with a drill, fixing props. What were some differences for you in actual job descriptions that maybe you didn't learn at college? Because I don't remember how to pack a truck from my stage management education.
Yeah, no, it was all brand new to me. I was the only American on the stage management team. Everyone else was from the UK. So it was run like a UK production where stage management is full on in charge of props, consumables, anything that a blue man touches, we're in charge of it. So that was a whole new world for me. I was not prepared. I thought I was going to be writing reports and doing paperwork and making schedules, and no, not at all, not true. So I showed up and it was literally like, here's my drill, here's my safety glasses, literally build this show in 3 weeks. Okay, cool, great. And like figure out how to make a feast table, which is this table that banana is pressurized, squirted out of, and it's a crazy thing in Blue Man world, but very hands-on. I wish I had taken more technical classes in college. Those skills are so important for everyone to have. I was lucky enough to remember some of it, and lucky enough where like I knew our inches system, whereas everyone else knew metric, and so I was able to actually converse with everyone in the hardware stores, and so that was funny, but it was very different. It was build the show and then run a track, and then that's it.
Wow,
And
wow.
pack trucks and unpack trucks.
Yeah, packing a truck is an art in its own, and I do want a future podcast. I'll let you all in on a secret. I'm going to interview one of the truck drivers from a tour that I was on who taught me how to pack a truck. So, give me what did you find out while you were on tour? What was it like living on the road? What should you pack? What do you need to know?
We had a very cushy tour. This was no one night sit downs, no in and outs real quick. We had 1 and 2 week sit downs, and that was like heaven. It
Yeah,
was so nice compared to like the horror stories of other shows and shows that sit down for one nights for like 3 weeks. I am not built for that. Those
sure.
people are amazing. And that's not what I need to do. So we had 2 week sit downs in Russia. We had 1 week sit downs in Canada. And it was very sweet. Once we were loaded in, we didn't have to touch anything. We showed up to do the shows. And then when we were done, we just packed the trucks and loaded out. What I would take, and I wish I thought about what I needed before I actually like went on tour, because I did. plan. But if you're touring internationally, you need international chargers. Like, you need international chargers. You also need to make sure that your phone, you can put in an extra SIM card, because I got to Russia and under my Sprint contract, I wasn't able to put a SIM card in my phone from Russia. So I literally bought a phone in Russia. Like, using Google Translate, I was like, hi, I need the phone. And he would like type back in Russian and being like, blah, blah, blah. And this is how much this is. And it was a crazy experience. So make sure your phone, that you can put a SIM card in your phone.
I love that. I love this story.
Of course. I would take like a great lipstick. You're not packing crazy, beautiful clothes. Take a lipstick. You're going to want it for opening. You're going to want it to go on that pretty dinner. You're going to want it. And then, I had another thing. It's gone. Oh, well.
It's okay. If it comes back to you later, just blurt it out. We'll be here. So that was your time on the road. And then how did you end up in Vegas again with CIRC?
So spring of 2019, we had just finished our Canada leg, and we were essentially told, you're going to be on a non-paid dark for 6 weeks, and then you're going to spend a month in Saudi Arabia, and then you're not going to have a job anymore because the show is going to close. And I said, well, I don't really want to not get paid for 6 weeks, wear an abaya for a month, and then not have a job. So I quit. I said, thank you. This was great. I enjoyed all of you. I'm done. My leg ends here. And they were like, okay, great. We'll see you again in the future sometime. Perfect. And we sort of had a window of opportunity to leave if we wanted to. So I took it when I could. And then the person I was dating at the time got a job at in Vegas. They got a job at Run in Vegas. And I was like, well, let's go to Vegas because I love Vegas. I've spent 2 summers there already. So let's do it. And then I worked for Celestia, the tent show in Vegas. It's a brand new tent show. It opened last year. When it opens back up, go see Celestia because it's a beautiful show and it's very affordable for people who can't afford Cirque du Soleil shows. And sure. I had the connection for Celestia through USITT. So these through lines, like immediately I saw someone from USITT post on Facebook as I was driving across the country to move to Vegas without a job, say, hi, I need a full-time stage manager in Vegas. And I said, hi, I'm a stage manager and I'm moving to Vegas full-time. I don't have a job. So I literally interviewed 2 days after I got there, was working the 3 days later. Like, it was magic.
What a crazy turnaround of like perfect sequence of events. Jeez.
Completely perfect. And it's all like connections and mentorship is so important, because if I hadn't gone to USITT, if I hadn't stayed in contact, I would never have gotten to where.
Yeah. I mean, can't say good enough things about these networking opportunities. So tell me now a little bit about a CIRC stage management team. What are the different positions on a team? And then where does the team sit in the overall CIRC hierarchy as a company?
So the team is on the artistic side of things. There's a very distinct split between technical and artistic, and stage management sits with the artists on artistic, as well as company management and higher up artistic folks. Technical is everyone from a technical manager all the way down to props people and carpentry, blah, blah, blah. The stage management team is split differently than a standard Broadway team. We would have a general stage manager and then multiple stage managers, assistant stage managers, and then you'll have on-call stage managers. And on-calls would come in if someone was sick, if there wasn't enough coverage for the show that night, an on-call would come in and run a track so they could balance out the coverage.
Sure. So when you re-entered the Vegas world of CIRC, you were on call first.
Yes.
So talk to me a little about coverage for a show, and your show specifically. Let's just use that as an example. How many stage managers does it take each night to run the show, and what tracks are they running?
So for O, I started as an on-call, and I learned the track that I needed and enough names to get by. And for O, you only need 5 people, 5 stage managers to run the show. You need a show caller, a backup show caller, a stage left, a stage right, and a rover. So 5 stage managers in the building during the shows. Usually there's 6 employed. And then for the project that I was brought on for, we had 9 of us. So that was, and the project I was brought on for is what they called the 2020 7-day-a-week project. So they added over 150 new employees to run the show full-time 7 days a week. I was one of those people as a full-time assistant stage manager.
Wow, amazing. So you have your tracks now. I'm interested in a backup show caller. What is that role? What is the logic behind that?
The logic is that if something were to happen to the show caller, they can immediately step in and it's seamless and there's no issues at all. That's
Amazing.
the same with the rover track. The rover doesn't necessarily, on O at least, they don't necessarily have a full-on track to perform. They're just in the building if something happened to a stage manager that they can step in immediately and have a seamless change.
That kind of reminds me in a theatrical landscape of like maybe an office track per se. Yeah.
Exactly.
See, we can communicate. We're all very similar. So something else I'm as you can tell very fascinated by all of this. Talk to me about how you put together the show for the evening, or the first show of the evening could be different than the second show. What is that lineup like? What is that process?
So a myth that I think we learned in school is that at UNCSA in college is that all Cirque shows have interchangeable acts, and the calling stage manager can literally pick up the trapeze act and say, oh, this is going to be after this, and just pop it into their book and it's all fine and dandy and everyone just moves on. And that's not necessarily the case with all shows. Oh my gosh, blown away. What?
Tell me more.
Some shows from Cirque are based off of acts, and other shows are based off of stories. So O is a show that is a story-based show. It has a through line all the way through the show, whether you understand it or not. All of the acts are the same for each show, but they're not always the same people performing those acts. So an example is the synchronized swimmers are not going to be the same synchronized swimmers every night doing the same performance, because stage management will rotate them out and coaches will rotate them out. But synchronized swimming is still in the show. Am I being clear? I feel like it's very
super clear. Yeah, I think the preconceived notion that I came into this podcast with is that we're not doing switting. We're just cutting it completely, and we're going to put paddling into the show tonight. And while they are similar, they're not the same. But what you're saying is in a story show, at least, mm-hmm, every part of the story is there because it helps the through line. You can't just get rid of, the swimmers, or you would miss that part of the story. Do I always understand Cirque stories? I cannot say yes, but I try.
That's okay. I don't either.
So from a paperwork aspect then, what are you generating every day? Are you making an in-out? And for those who don't know, in theatrical terms, an in-out is saying, okay, this person is going to be out tonight and this person will be in playing this role. Are you making a split track, which is if you have a bunch of people out, you might divvy up some essential parts of the show and say, okay, you usually don't do this, but you're going to do this tonight, and we're going to hodgepodge together a performance out of this. What do you guys generate?
So we essentially generate a glorified in-out. And I'm going to speak about this in terms of a 7-day, because that's what I'm most recently familiar with, a 7-day situation as opposed to just a 5-day a week, where with a 7-day, it's always somebody's weekend, and it's always somebody's first day back and last day in. So you have rotations every day. Cirque uses this database called Aurora, and it's every show is in Aurora. Everybody's name, what they do, what they're qualified to do, what they're cleared to do, any medical conditions, their size, costume information. It's all in there. So the stage manager, if you're creating the lineup for the night, you go in, you sit down at 3 o'clock, and you'll get what they call a coaches lineup. And the coaches lineup is what the coaches have decided they want to see that night in the show. So if they want to see Mike doing high dive with Ryan and whoever else, then they'll put that on the coaches lineup, and you plug that into the actual physical lineup. The catch is that from the coaches lineup, once you plug it in, there are a bunch of cues that you have to fill out because coaches decide acts. Stage management will rotate cues. And cues can be anything from somebody running across the stage, from moving a prop, from wearing a specific costume at a certain time on the stage. And so you have to be aware of who's in what act, how many acts they're in, how many cues they're doing, and to keep everyone balanced through the show. And we're not talking like 10 people balanced, it's like 60 people balanced for the entire night. And this document's made every day. It takes roughly 3 hours to make. Sometimes it takes 3 hours and 45 minutes, and you get it done 5 minutes before the show starts. And then ideally it's done in three hours, and it's posted an hour before, and it's posted all around the theater. Rigging gets a copy, aquatics gets a copy, especially because they're providing harnesses to the artist. They need to know what artist is going to be in what spot at which time to give them the correct harness. And then you read the lineup to the entire audience, to the entire crew and performer cast over the PA system, and that's your lineup, and that's your Bible. That's like your run sheet for the night.
Yeah, so that was my next question is, I don't, these things don't have scripts or scores like traditional theater pieces. So you're clutching that lineup then with all of your cues, all of the acts, so you know who you're going to look for, I would assume. Is that?
Exactly. The lineup will, and I can send you a copy too if you want just better understanding or to post it.
Love that.
Somewhere, I don't know. But the lineup essentially has everyone's name in the position that they're going to be in. All the artists, technicians, they're not on the lineup. The stage manager is not on the lineup. It's just in the top, so the artists know who they can go to, who's in for the day. If they have a question or if they have a need, they can be like, oh, Liza's on stage left. I need to go talk to her. But you can see, and the reason we do it this way is because if there was ever an injury on stage, we would know exactly who is injured at whenever it happened. Because the last thing you want to have happen is have a show stop and not know who that person is. Yeah. And there's so many people. It's hard to remember their names all the time, especially when you're new and there's 150 new people coming in for this new project. So
yeah, and I mean, you kind of touched on this earlier, but the language barrier. How have you, as an American citizen and primarily English speaker, from what I know of you, how have you trained new muscles to work with those performers and get important messages across to them?
I only speak English. I speak very minimal Spanish, which is very unfortunate, and I need to get better. There's no excuse. I should just be better. But there's a huge language barrier with all the new people that came in for the 2020 project. They weren't Americans. They come from Russia, they come from Brazil, they come from all over the world, and they probably don't speak English very well. So that was very challenging to use Google Translate at your desk and say, this is what I need you to do right now because I need you to sign this or you can't go on stage tonight, or I need you to go to a costume fitting because they need your measurements, or whatever it may be. Later down the line, we started doing English classes for a lot of the performers who were not comfortable speaking English all the time. Thankfully, in the O Theater, there are hundreds of people that can speak many, many languages. And whenever we would need to call someone into the office that doesn't speak English well, we would always call a translator.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, wow. I'm once again stunned. I've never even thought about a lot of this, so it's so heartening to hear about the systems that are in place. Um, so you also kind of touched on crisis management during a show. Can you speak to what that's like?
Crisis management is it's what Cirque du Soleil is and what they're best at, I think. Um, it's so incredibly important to make sure that you are prepared for absolutely anything to happen on that stage. And Cirque is really good at making sure that everyone in the building is ready for anything that happens. Um, everyone is fully aware what fire lighting means. If there's a fire in the building, the LX board switches to a separate lighting cue, and everyone knows what that lighting cue means. If there's a active shooter in the building, everyone knows what that lighting cue is. Everyone is fully aware, and then everyone has specific tracks that follow whatever the instance may be. Injury wise, we had a very serious accident in January at O, and it was my first wake-up call to realize that when we actually practice and we train our emergency protocol, we do it for a reason. And it was mind-blowing because I actually, like, it clicked. Everything that I had been practicing for the last year with this company completely made sense. Every conversation I had with an artist, every time I got to understand what they do and their passion about their craft, it was like, oh, I need to be as supportive as possible so that they feel safe enough to perform and to trust that they're in good hands if anything happened.
Yeah. Wow, you just got to the heart of it right there. It's
That's the
all about
heart.
trust. It's trust and creating a safe space, and I think that's true between any performer stage manager relationship. Liza, wow, okay, I think my last question for you would be, I would love to hear your production scary. Tell me like a fun, outrageous, classic, it doesn't have to be scary, story from a production.
Um, Funniest, scariest, weirdest story, not really scary, just ridiculous. In Russia with Blue Man Group, our last tour destination was Ekaterinburg, Russia. Beautiful city. It was literally December 30th, Russia, negative 15 degrees outside. And we had loadout. And the venue we were playing in, the arena we were playing in, we didn't have a loading dock big enough to fit our trucks. So we had to load out through the second story window of this arena in snow in negative 15-degree weather. Like literally loaded out an entire arena touring show from a second story window.
For those of you who may be taking my silence as anything but astonishment, that would entail lifting multiple road cases out of a window, whole lighting rigs, all those big trusses you see in rock and roll shows and like arena shows, the stage itself, then all the props, all of the wardrobe boxes, office boxes, all of the tools. I cannot stress enough how insane. Sorry, maybe not the right word. I'm trying to use insane a lot less. Redonkulous that sounds.
Yeah.
Were there any mishaps? I mean, did you make it out?
We made it out. It took 16 hours, but we made it out. We were there all day and all night. It was horrendous. And the funniest part about this is I stayed. The stage managers didn't have to be there. I stayed because a lot of Americans were on the crew and I wanted to fly back with them instead of just by myself back to the States for the 14-hour flight. So wanted to do that. So I stayed. I was the only stage manager there. So I ended up doing things in a loadout that I would not have done before, like packing new things together and making sure things fit into boxes the right way. Boxes I've never seen on this tour that are someone else's job, and I became responsible. But the locals are all like 15-year-old Russian boys that don't speak any English and who just want a cigarette break. That's it. That's all they want. They don't want to be there. And so we were like struggling to fit these things in these boxes, and I couldn't communicate to them that I didn't know how it fit. And they were like, this girl is stupid. She doesn't know but they were all speaking in Russian. So I had no idea what they were saying. It was crazy. And then also, if you didn't know, Russian stagehands are paid absolute.
Interesting.
Very interesting. I asked them, how long are they here for, what their call is, because in the States we have very specific crew calls and very specific hours and pay, and they are paid nothing, and they work until the job is done. They do not leave, they do not break. That's it. So these amazing young men and I were just trying to put all these things in boxes, who were working for absolute nothing for 16 hours in Russia in winter in Ekaterinburg.
Wow. Yeah. Liza, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. This has been so much fun.
Oh my gosh, yes. Anything that Liza wants to share with me, I will include down in the description in a Dropbox folder. If you have any questions about CIRC, or if the questions I asked did not do justice, I'm sure you can find Liza on social media and send her your questions. But thank you again, Liza. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. This is amazing. I love what you're doing. Get the arts accessible to anyone who wants access.
We have come to the end of episode 3 of the Stage Manager Supply Co. podcast. Once again, brought to you by John and Susan Hackman. John and Susan Hackman, really great folks, honestly. A huge thanks to Liza for sharing her experiences with me, and a huge thanks to you for listening. I am on my eternal quest to become the next Howard Stern of arts education, and one day I will pull the sword from the scabbard. If you are listening to the podcast on Apple Podcast or Spotify, feel free to follow and rate and review us. And if you're watching the podcast on YouTube, where we do post full videos of interviews with each guest, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe to let me know that you're enjoying the podcast. Thanks again for listening, and I will catch you next week. Bye!